Welcome, guys, to another live episode. So today's episode is a special episode. I have actually got a guest to me with me today, and we've actually been trying to set this up now for the better part of more than a month and a half now, but we're finally on the same schedule. It's all the way from the UK, from a different time zone, and he made the time here to join us. If you want to go and introduce yourself, Rob, the floor is yours.
Well, firstly, thank you so much, Emmanuel, for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on your show. From podcaster to podcaster, thank you for all the great work you're doing for your community. I think it's amazing. So, yeah, my name is Rob Hanna. I'm the founder of KC Partners. We're a talent solutions and content creation firm tailored to the legal industry. So I'm trying to build a kinder, more collaborative legal community. I'm also the host of the Legally Speaking podcast. We're sponsored by a legal tech unicorn in Clio. I'm actually off to Nashville next week to be part of their legal ClioCon event, which is the largest legal tech event in the world. And we produce a lot of thought leadership in and around the legal industry related to legal careers, mental health, diversity, inclusion, and lots more. I like to invest in recruitment startups and legal tech startups. I do some speaking. I also work with LinkedIn and I've done some projects with them. I help them with the rollout of the LinkedIn audio, which is one of their newest features. And yeah, just do various things in terms of mentoring and trying to build a really kind legal community. That's what gives me the buzz because, my grandfather's in the legal world and I'm trying to emulate that legacy in the digital world. So thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. It's awesome to have you. So, just out of curiosity, have you always been in the legal space? Was this something you did? What did you do prior?
So I started in the oil and gas energy space. So I've always been in the recruitment sector. But in terms of industries, I started my journey during the 2008 Lehman Brothers crash. That was literally the first day
Okay.
of my career. So I
Uh-huh.
always think if you can survive a Lehman's crash without recession, a pandemic, and various other market things, you're going to be okay. You build up a bit of metal along the way. So I did oil and gas, and then I moved into procurement and supply chain. And then once I built up enough experience and I knew my real why, I moved into legal about 8 years ago.
Gotcha. So, what's the real why?
I think the real why for me is what I touched on in that opening statement was, you know, I'm really passionate about helping people in the legal community feel seen, heard, and provide an impact. Because I use a story, if I may, if you can just bear with me for a minute.
Absolutely.
My grandfather ran a very successful law firm in the 1950s here in the UK. He built that from scratch. There was no sort of financial backing. He came from a very working class background. And that was all well and good. But what really struck with me wasn't necessarily that. It was actually when he retired. And one Christmas, I went round to his house and I said, Grandpa, why do you keep getting so many Christmas cards year on year on year? You don't have that many friends, in a jokey way. And he said, Rob, no, you're right. I don't have that many friends. These are from my clients and my generations beneath me's clients, i.e., their children of their clients. And I'm like, wow. And they're like, yeah, they write to me. They tell me about how their children are getting on, how their lives are getting on, like the work that I did for them and how that really positively impacted their lives. And I just thought, wow, what a legacy, what a way to not only have built a successful business, but also to have had that real impact that people want to keep in touch. And I thought, well, why can't I 10x that in the digital world using all these resources, like we're on a podcast now to get that message out there, to do good. And that's kind of really my mission, to try and really help people as best I can when it comes to legal and their careers and their journey. And that's kind of what gets me out of bed.
Gotcha. Okay. So now this is a personal question for me. So, how do you stay motivated on the days in which you don't want to show up?
Yeah, I mean, and there's plenty of those, right? And anyone who says there's not those days is just lying, right?
Yeah.
So that this is what's called life. There's no work-life balance, it's life. So I think it comes back to knowing, like, what are you doing? Are you passionate about what you do? You can still have days you don't want to show up and be passionate. Like, there's been days that I have been very passionate about what I'm trying to do with this mission, but maybe I'm just knackered because I've been up 3 times in the night because my daughter was unwell or has been poorly. Maybe I'm just tired and I'm just not feeling it that day. So I think the real reason is you've got to be passionate about what you do. Like, I have this real drive, this innate passion for what I do that carries me through, and I have an accountability above my head. head in terms of I can't let that legacy that I'm trying to leave continue go backwards, i.e. I don't want that reputation to be tarnished through what I do. So what I try and do is I try and bring excellence, professionalism to push myself forward, and know that I don't want to let late fat grandparents down if I'm trying to emulate the success of that. So kind of have an accountability barometer on top of my own personal passion.
Got you. Okay, so this is a very interesting question, and I'm not. I'm just fascinated. So, I give you a story. So I was talking to a 16-year-old kid, and I think he was 16, should be 16, 17 at the time, and he was very passionate about playing. It's a flute instrument, right? Trumpet, right? And I told him, I said, we had a logical decision, and we had an interaction, and I said, he said, I asked him, I'm like, what do you do? Like, he said, I don't want have any interest in going to college. I don't want to go to college. Because he's, kids this day. So I was like, okay. So I'm like, what do you want to do? He's like, I actually would enjoy doing something that has to do with the trumpet, the flute. I think it's trumpet, or it's a saxophone or something. I think it's a sax maybe. And it's not a saxophone because saxophones are bigger. But so I was like, okay, well, how much money would you make realistically doing this? And he goes, well, I don't. He's like, I'm not really sure. And I'm like, okay, so how much money would you say the best player makes? Maybe a few $100,000, maybe, right? But there are a lot of people that are playing on the subways who don't have that a trumpet gig, right? So I was like, realistically, I'm like, what do you want my advice? So I asked him, so do you want my advice? He goes, yeah, what's your advice? I said, focus on something that makes you money first, right? And then when you make the money, then you can do it on the side. And then obviously you can grow from there because it's something you're passionate about. Now, this is just my personal, basically prerogative per se. But what would you say if someone came to you and said, hey, Rob, okay, I really, really am passionate about sewing. I love sewing. It's something I enjoy doing, right? Doesn't pay me that much money and I have a family to feed. What would you tell this person?
I would say you need to get a mentor and you need to think about how you could scale that passion, because if you're passionate about sewing, there's a million and different ways that you could use the technology that we're surrounded by today to actually turn that into a business, right? If you're that good, you could maybe license out courses, you could teach people, you could set up a YouTube channel, you could do various ways to get inbound, you could get sponsorship deals, you can get ways to. So for me, I would actually drill down on that passion to see, can we shape and mold that into a tangible business, and really stress test that and have mentors and people around me who could do it. And if it's not possible, then yeah, always look at plan B. But I'm a big believer in there should never be a plan B, because plan A is always going to work, right? So I just think I would say to that person, you need to go and surround yourself with people that have got the right business acumen, and use a platform like LinkedIn, whatever it may be, because I genuinely think that passion could carry through into creating an income. And to be honest with you, and I learned this quote the other day, money is just information, right? So of course we need money to live. I use a scenario, right? And I think I got this off something that I can't remember which entrepreneur said this. You're stranded on a desert island. You have $50 trillion in your bank account. You have no access to the internet. You have no access to anything. How helpful is that $50 trillion to you at that moment? That's going to help you survive.
Yeah,
It's not. It's
it's not
just.
useful.
It's information we need. How am I going to get off that island with, like, what do I need to survive? Like, what are the things that I would need to go and do? So obviously the more money you have, the more access to information you can get. But I think it's really important that you don't get bogged down on just, I need to earn £200,000, because if I just don't believe that anyone kind of, it's not the way to drive you forward. I think if you have a passion about what you're doing, of course you need to know sort of, the base level of what you need, but don't just aspire to make $500,000 because you think that's what I should be making. And do what makes you happy and makes you feel good inside, and don't just chase sort of numbers for the sake of numbers, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, but it's like I'm gonna push back a little bit. I'm gonna push back because I'm very fascinated by the idea and of chasing passion and not money, right? But
Yeah.
if you look at it from a perspective, right? If I said your services and I said, hey Rob, you love what you do. I think you're awesome at it. And I checked out your podcast, looked at everything. I personally believe that what you're doing, phenomenal work. And I said, hey Rob, would you mind doing the same thing you do for me for free at no cost? Would you do it?
I have. It's a valid question. I have communities where there's free resources and information that is put together. So there's an element that would always try to give as much pro bono and help people where possible. But no, could I dedicate 100% of my time all the time for doing things for free? No. So that is fair, but I do believe we all have a responsibility to try and be kind to people and help people and support people where best we can, where possible. So I would always try to, if I can't help at that point in time, maybe I know someone who does. It's like reach one, teach one. Like, so I'm a big believer in, like, there's definitely something I could do for that person, more than just saying, no, I can't help you right now.
Got you. And it's interesting. And I'm just asking this question because I'm very fascinated because I want to know, because I've asked these questions previously in the past, on previous podcasts, and I've had somewhat similar answers and stuff, but I'm very fascinated by this. So wouldn't you say, by you charging for your services per se, rather than doing free work, you're actually doing the customer, you're actually helping the customer? I'm gonna tell you why. So let's imagine, have you ever done a service for someone where, or you got something where it was free, right? Because we value things that we work for, right? Like, let's say you have 3 services, right? And one of the services, because it was an experiment that was actually done, which is, before I talk about this scenario, there was an experiment that was done, and there was, so they had a test group. I can't remember how many people it was, but it was a test group. And in this test group, they had wine. I don't know, you a wine drinker?
I drink a little bit of wine, yeah. More red wine than white wine.
Okay, perfect. So they had a bunch of wine. They had wine, and they had the wine, and basically they labeled it based off of price. So example was like $1,000 wine, a $500 wine, and $100 wine bottle, right? And they gave each participant what is the word? A taste of it, right? And after the taste, they asked them to say, which wine do you think is the best quality? And you know where I'm going with this, right? And they said the $1,000 wine, they're like, it's phenomenal. They checked out, they're like, oh, the taste, the quality, it's amazing. And then I'm like, what do you think about $100 wine? They're like, well, absolutely, I don't think it's something I would try. This is not something that I believe it doesn't align with me per se. And then at the end of it all, they said, hey guys, you guys actually tasted the same wine. It's the same thing. It just tasted differently based off the price, right? So it's almost as though, wouldn't you say you're doing the customers a disservice if you say, hey, I'm going to do free work? Because I've done work for free, and people just don't see the same value, as opposed to, hey, if you pay 2,000-3,000, it's like, okay, now I have to pay attention.
Exactly. When people pay, they pay attention, right? It's as simple as that. Even if a relationship dynamic will change from the exchange of just £1 or $1.
Absolutely.
As soon as someone has to invest something, right? And it should be uncomfortable for someone as well in terms of a stretch point, right? It's like, I really want this service, but maybe I can't quite get there now. But if you can find a way and you kind of invest, then you're invested. So I definitely agree. When people pay, they pay attention. People don't always value things for free. But there's other things, if you're looking at on the other swing side, let's go back to that sewing business example. Let's say they wanted me to help them from the start for free. Well, maybe if we set up a company, maybe I could get, if I believed in the business, I'm happy to devote my time, but maybe I can get an equity stake. We all know about, it isn't time, you don't be you're not going to get wealthy by charging by the time, right? By the hour. Mm-hmm. It's about generating wealth and building equity in organizations, or having something that's scalable and sellable down the line. So, you could definitely, and as entrepreneurs, we're always taking risk, right? You don't risk anything, you risk everything. So, you could maybe risk that approach of, do you know what? I'm going to invest my time because I see the potential of these businesses, and I'm going to get in and get a good exit off the back of it. So you could look at it that way too.
I mean, yes. Okay, so I don't know. Maybe it's my personal experience, but I've recently invested. I invested in six different businesses, but they were smaller businesses, and it wasn't that much of an investment. And I realized when I put my time and my money, because I am the investor, I seem to care more about the business than the actual person who brought up with the idea, and it's their business, because they have no skin in the game. It's almost a double-edged sword, where you're doing something nice, but then again, you have more to lose, because imagine you invest all your time, your resources, your network, your connections, and then, let's say the person brings sewing, for instance, and then let's say they're like, oh, I feel sick and I don't want to sew today. And you're like, I invested all my time in this. And they're like, Well, I didn't ask you. You see. So it kind of gets into that. I
But
don't know.
you can tell if someone's passionate. I mean, I've been around people in the recruitment and careers and talent space, and I can tell when someone's giving me lip service that I want to do this, or I want to step up, or I want career progression. And I know they don't, right? They're going for the motion, but you can tell when you're looking in the whites of someone's eyes how passionate they are, and if they're going to wake up when they don't want to wake up and deliver.
Yeah.
So I kind of agree with you, but at the same time, like, I would always like to think I bet on the right horse, just because maybe similar to you, I've bet on the wrong horses over time. And now I know if someone's genuinely passionate that, whether they'll carry through. And look, there isn't loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of those always immediately out there. You have to spend time finding.
Got you. So what is your vetting process like? Because you obviously have a recruitment, you guys have a recruitment service that you do for law firms. And I'm pretty sure whenever a law firm's like, hey, Rob, listen, I want you guys to find me the best talent that's out there, right? What's your vetting process? Because, how do you know this person is actually even good at what they do, and it's not just all lip service per se or resume service?
Yeah, well, I mean, with a lot of our clients, there will also be technical testings. So,
Okay.
they will go through a level of, okay, I've worked on this level of transaction. Maybe let's say you're a corporate lawyer, and they've worked on, multi-jurisdictional, highly complex matters. Let's say there's been two blue chip companies that have done a big merge. They're going to need to know their head around those documentations and those draftings. So there would be some form of technical testings to ensure that they're up to that kind of level, that it's not just putting things on the CV that can actually be stacked up. So, again, typically when you're speaking to people, it's like, how can you test that they have those core competencies? So can it be you put them through scenario based examples? What are some of the scenarios that they maybe you test on the competencies, whatever it may be. But I think when you really get into the nuts and bolts of things, you want to know technically if they're down. And similarly with founders, I quite like founders and entrepreneurs that have failed. I want people that have already failed like 2 or 3 times to come to me, but are still coming back, right? I think it's very rare you get a first-time founder that's hit the jackpot, right? I think it's very rare. I mean, they do exist, but most people, you get a few knocks along the way. So I would be testing for that passion. It's like, is this your first or second or third business, fourth business, fifth business? Like, what have you done before? Like, what did you learn from that? Like, what would you do done differently? Why did you give up? And I would really stress test around that to understand more of the psyche of the person, to understand if I'm making a better bet.
Interesting. Are you familiar with the recent? You're familiar with Instacart, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, but probably not
Yeah.
as versed as you.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have it up in the UK or no?
Not as much as over where you guys are.
Okay. So, did you hear the news of Instacart went public? They had an IPO offering probably a week ago or 2 weeks ago. They went public for 9.3 billion, and there's a point I'm getting to here. They went public for $9.3 billion valuation, which obviously was a drop from 39 billion to 9.3, which is kind of significant. But the founder cashed out for, take a guess how much? 1.1 billion. So he cashed out for 1.1
billion.
1.1 billion, right? Which is interesting because if he had had his IPO back in 2020, 2021, he actually would have cashed out for, I think it was maybe 4 point something billion. But because of the valuation dropped, so hence the share price, so hence he did 1.1 billion. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this is, so I don't know if you're familiar with his story or not too familiar with his story. No. Okay, so he started Instacart about 11 years ago. From basically, he checked his fridge and all he had was hot sauce, and then basically he's like, all right, there's no way for me to basically, I need a delivery, I need stuff delivered, right? And there's no one else out there that's doing it. And finally he started it, but he had failed at 20 different companies, right? 20 different companies before starting that. But he mentioned something which was interesting. Was he was like, I was the receptionist, I was a customer service, I did the food deliveries, I did the orders, I developed the apps, I did all that stuff, right? Now, what would you say as far as, because I know you have 2 kids, right? Okay, so how would you say when someone comes to you with a concept?
I've got a young nearly 2-year-old daughter. So yeah.
Okay, you have just one daughter? Hello?
Yeah, just the one daughter, 2 years. Yeah,
gotcha. Congratulations, by the way. Congratulations, by the way. I don't know. Are you sleeping? Are you getting any sleep?
Yeah, we're kind of getting through the sleep. We're coming into the sort of toddler tantrums style. So
Oh
that's
yeah, it doesn't get better. Just telling you,
they're
it doesn't get better.
they're fun.
Yeah, it doesn't get better. I have a 5-year-old son, and actually at 4 they start to actually listen. So 2 more years.
That's
Uh,
helpful. Yeah, we'll dig deep.
but the question I was getting into here is how do you balance running your organization? Because you have KC Partners, and I believe you guys have another West W. Remind me again. There was
I've Web3 Insanity is another
Web3.
business I'm involved in, and yeah, some other things. Yeah.
Yes. So you have all this umbrella companies that you're basically operating. How do you balance, family, having a kid, and then running the organizations?
Yeah, it's a really important question because do you know what's helped me is making my life virtual. So I can operate any business I'm involved in by the internet connection. So it doesn't matter if I'm at home, which allows me to do, but like tonight, you said to me, like, how long can we record for? Like, what's the situation? I said, it's a non-negotiable for me to not, I don't miss bath time with my daughter, right? I make sure that that is important enough to me that I will be there. And so I will probably do 345, let's say, out of 365 baths a year with my daughter. Like it's something that's important to me. So I think blocking out time, but also enabling myself to be virtual, so I don't need to physically be everywhere. Of course, I travel and I go and see clients and all of these other things, but the flexibility of the fact that I can just log on and work with an internet connection allows me to be very flexible with my times and what I do. Whereas I think still, if you're maybe 5 days a week in an office and you need to spend certain times in a particular place, it's very hard to juggle your family and work life. Whereas for me, like today, I could have done some, because there is no work-life balance, right? It's life. So I don't believe in the whole work life, but it's just life, right? It's one thing. So today I've done some personal things mixed in with some business things, and it's worked really well for me. For some people, when they might just want that complete separation, they go to the office and then they come home. But I strongly believe any entrepreneur that's a true entrepreneur, the off switch is really, rarely ever completely off. It's always sort of twinkling in the back time. So the best way you can manage that is kind of by setting out time and blocking out time. So for me, the evenings and the mornings and like picking up from nursery, like things like that are really important to me. So I'll make the time because it's important enough to me.
It's interesting. You bring up, the work from home situation, which obviously it's your business. So if you don't work, no one else is going to do it because it's your business, right? Now, there's the whole work from home situation where a lot of companies are doing a recall and saying, no, we want all our staff back because we're finding there's a drop in morale and people aren't really working. And some people are like, they're like, hey, come back. And they're like, well, I don't live in California anymore now. I actually live in Tennessee. And you're like, well, this is, so in a situation, don't you think it's actually, this is my question is, don't you think it's actually important to have a sense of that, like, because there's a sense of community you get when you're around people that have a staff in. Like, I give you an example. So I was thinking of getting an office here, and I was looking, and my girlfriend was like, why do you need an office? So I was like, she's like, you do everything virtually. I was like, I know I do everything virtually, but let's say I want to talk to, someone in the marketing team regarding stuff. Rather than jumping on Zoom, I just badge right into the office and like, hey, which is kind of cool. Because have you seen the show The Office?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. One of my favorites.
Yeah.
Although the UK office, not so much of the American office, but I know it's huge over there as well. I think the UK one's better personally.
You think it? Oh, there is a UK version, really?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I have to send you a link to it, but the American version is good as well.
Please do, because I want to check it out. But it's kind of like an awesome stuff where you have everyone kind of around you. Don't you think there's a drop in morale per se when you have everybody just doing their own thing, everyone is working from home? Even though you're the one leading the team, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're focused, but don't you think there's a drop in morale when you do a work from home situation?
I think if you're passionate about the job that you do and the work that you enjoy, I think there needs to be things that are around you that could help you and structure and things to look forward to. But to come back to your question, the original question before that was like, how do I balance it? I've engineered it so I can make my life balance for it, right? So for me, I'm passionate and I like to be around people. But you make a really good point, like, business owners and loneliness is one of the biggest issues. So, collaborating with people, going out, all of these things really, really help with that. But no, I think we just live in a different time. And, look, not to sort of go into a like Web3 conversation, but I do believe the power of technology, and we will be in Oculus and metaverse and experiences and spatial experiences. And again, people will contrarian and say, no, that'll never beat the power of human connection. And absolutely. And I understand the importance of human connections, but we have these super enhanced technologies, which is the next generation are going to grow up with them. They're going to be in these sort of environments. People are going to want to be able to have a career and because they look at the generations that have gone past. Like I do my 9 to 5, I go to this exact office and I go home on the train that's really bad all the time. Why can't I just hop from city to city to city, move around, still work, have a lifestyle, enjoy life, and all of these other things? I think that's more exciting. And if I was coming into the world at the start of my career to see all these potential options, rather than being transfixed in one place, I think that would be quite exciting. But again, it's quite a contrarian view because I know a lot of people say, look, they want to be in a team, they want to be in a structured environment around people. I absolutely get that, and I'm not against that. And I think that's great, but I think there's going to be better options for people that probably want to do a little bit more and sort of expand their mind and not just have to kind of go to the same place all the time.
Got you. Okay, that's interesting. You talk about the metaverse and everything. Because I asked a question before that, but I'm very intrigued by what is. I personally don't know what the metaverse is. This is the
metaverse. We're in the metaverse right now, right? This is just a virtual shared experience. It's the simplest way to explain the metaverse. When people use all these clunky terms, it is just a virtual, immersive, shared experience, right? And there's different versions of that, and of course, you can get into really super advanced situations. But the reality is, we've been operating in the metaverse for a long time, and just with all Web3 technology everything coming in, it's just the next upgrade, right? It's just the next upgrade of interaction. So I think you can just look at like what are some of the big brands doing at the moment, like with Nike, and the way that they're looking at digital products and marketing and advertising and all of that good stuff. Like we're just getting started, but when this really becomes the norm, I think, and when that is really brought into the workplace culture, I think that's going to be super exciting.
Interesting. And what's interesting? So this is just kind of piggybacking. I'm going to ask this question here. So you mentioned passion, which is something, obviously we're all familiar with ChatGPT, AI, and all that stuff, right? So one of the things that I've been, because I have some programming experience, so one of the things I've been passionate about is it's like I would say the inner kid inside of me per se I've been passionate about is conversational AI, right? So in the sense is to, let's say you had a customer service or let's say you do outbound to recruit people, right? And you have to be on the phones for making 100 calls. So one of the things we have, and it's not our software, but we're basically an agency broker for it and we design it, is we had a virtual assistant service where we would do the cold calls and stuff for people. But then AI came about and I was like, you know what about if I can have AI do it? And then we transitioned to actually having artificial intelligence doing the conversational where call you and you'd be like, you would never know it. Just you think it's someone from Kansas is calling you. And it's like, but the call structure, it's so streamlined, so awesome. Now, which brings me to my question here is what do you think is going to be the role of AI in the legal space per se? Is like, do you think we're going to start seeing robot lawyers? I mean,
yeah, well, you can Google that, and there will actually be some things that already come up. We're already, judges are now utilized. It's actually a really fast-growing market. So, I mentioned before that my podcast, Legal Speaking Podcast, we're sponsored by a legal tech unicorn, Clio. When I'm off to Nashville next week, that's the largest legal tech conference in the world. It's going to be a lot of top content about the future of law, AI, and it's massive. Like there's so many different, and I have a lot of those people come onto my show actually, like for contract drafting, reviewing, due diligence. Like AI can really help with that. And I had you guys familiar with Shark Tank, obviously over there in,
of course,
in the US.
yeah, of course.
I had we have Dragon's Den over here, and I had
Okay.
a former dragon who was on that show called Piers Liddy come onto my podcast, and he was a former lawyer. And he's just set up his own AI connected business, basically helping startups and businesses implement AI, all of that good stuff. And he said within the legal world, it's like a value pyramid. And basically what's happening with AI is pushing the human capability, the need to move up the value pyramid. Much like you said, like AI can automate and disrupt a lot of these layers. Like you gave that great example, like AI can do it. So unless legal people can find a way, the human side to move up the value pyramid, in what Piers says, the AI will eat your lunch. The job will no longer be there. So I think there is a threat. I still think there will be a need for sort of the human element of lawyering, but I think it's a very it's just a very combative. Oh, there's not going to be, it's not going to be a need for me. I think I think you need to just stay curious, myself included, even the recruitment side, like the robot recruiter. I think we all just need to stay curious, and we still need to be open to learning and just not underestimate the power of where we are, because we're still at sort of really early stages of all of this AI and more machine learning, right? Because AI only really tells us what we already know. It's the language models and machine learning that I think is the super exciting. And then when we move into robotics, which is what you touched on, I think that's another level. And I'll use an example, right, on that. My daughter will not trust me when she's 16 years old to drive her in a car. Just process that. She will not trust me to drive her in a car. Why? Because she'll be growing up in a world of driverless cars and be like, Daddy, why did humans drive? Like, there's so many more car accidents and human impact errors and drunken incidents. Like, no, I don't feel comfortable. They won't be in that world, right? They'll be in a world of super enhanced tech that does so many things for them that, the human element is almost like, no, that's too dangerous, Daddy. I don't want to be in a car with you. I want to be within this tech. And I think it's scary, interesting, and exciting all in the same breath.
I mean, it's scary and interesting, but it's also in the sense as to there's also the doom and gloom of it, right? Because what's equally really good is also equally really bad, right? Because like, let's say somebody wants to learn how to commit a crime, and they ask, because you can actually break into like, if you have decent programming, you can rewrite a little bit of the source code and get different data from ChatGPT, where to actually give you like really, 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 really terrible things. But what if somebody's like trying to use it for bad? Well, in that situation, because it's really good, you have driverless cars, but you also can have somebody hack into a car. I'll give you an example. So when was this? This was this week. It was this weekend. So it's a big bank. It's a big bank here in the States, and that's one of the banks I bank with. So it was a weekend. I got a call from the bank, and it said, "Hey, just want to let you know someone was trying to break into your account." Right? And I was like, "Whoa, okay." They're like, "Okay, this amount, this amount." I was like, "Okay, oh, whoa, right?" I was like, "We got to stop this." They're like, "Okay, perfect, yeah." So to stop it, we just need to verify some information. I was like, "Okay, cool." This was coming. The call was coming from the actual bank's number. It wasn't another number. I was like, okay, but something was a little fishy, because I'm like, why are you calling me? I looked at my account. I'm like, nothing, there's no transaction. So they go, okay, we need to verify your name. I was like, all right. No, they said we need to verify your date of birth. So I did date of birth, and they're like, all right, verify your address, but they gave me a wrong zip code, right? It was a very wrong zip code. I was like, just confirm it's your zip code. I was like, huh, okay. I was like, yeah, that's my zip code. I was like, yep, that's what we see here. They're like, okay, verify your name, and I gave a fake name, and they're like, that's absolutely what we see here. And I was like, fascinating. Okay, this is getting interesting. They're like, all right, so we need to verify the 16 digit of your debit card. I was like, yeah. I'm like, why do you need that? He goes, well, because we need to add it to a block list. I'm like, well, you're the bank, you should have you gave me the debit card, you should have it. He goes, no, it's a security information, so we can't have it, you have to give it to us. So I was like, all right. I was like, okay. I made up a different number, and he's like, absolutely, that's what we see here. And I was like, interesting, okay, it's gonna be fun. And he's like, well, we need to file a police report. I was like, okay. He's like, well, I have all this on recording. I was actually going to talk about it on live. And he's like, I need your driver's license information. And I'm like, I made up something else. Like, absolutely, that's what we see here. And at the end of it all, he's like, just verify your date of birth is. I gave him a date of birth that I was some 60-year-old man, and he's like, that's what he saw there. So I was like, hey, I guess I'm 60 now. But I'm also thinking from a perspective as to him being able to hack into an actual computer system and port your number and use a secured bank's number. That's not something that's easy to do. So in my situation, in this case situation, maybe he could have learned that from an AI system that he asked, how do I port this number? And boom. So what would you say in a situation to people who are like, I think that AI is genuinely dangerous?
No, I absolutely accept that safety measures need to be put in as best as possible, but we also need to accept, rightly or wrongly, that the world that we're in, as of today, I would say, is there's always going to be crime. There's always going to be some bad actors out there, and unfortunately, all we can do, the good people, is really try and protect and put as best safety measures in as possible, and try and really promote the positive sides of this, and also give people really important information for not how to fall into those sort of scenarios that you said. I mean, that's quite a big scoping, different topic, different conversation for another day. Yeah. But I absolutely don't say that AI is a silver bullet. I totally accept that. I agree. And I think there definitely needs to be a good level of safety measures and everything else that goes through it. But with all technologies, it's like when the internet first started, right? There's always going to be, and phone hacking and all these things. Technologies, as they evolve, there's always going to be some form of, unfortunately bad actors, but the better we can kind of get there. Like, I'm always updating my McCaffrey security, right? My internet security for viruses, everything else. There's got to be the equivalent, but better, just given the speed of which things are advancing with AI for the AI world.
Interesting. Okay. So now, with your podcast, just if you want to share a little bit about the podcast and what you talk about, and, there's a listener out here that's like, hey, you know what, I really enjoy, this conversation, and I want to continue to, engage more with your content. So what would you, just a little bit more about the Legally Speaking podcast?
I always describe it as we're a law library, but with better snacks and far more engaging conversations, right?
Okay.
So a lot of people, when they hear a legal podcast, they're just going to think, particularly if they're not necessarily in the legal world but interested about it, it's like, this is going to be exceptionally boring and dull, right? Which actually is not the case. We have really interactive, fun, inspirational conversations, bringing out the human side of people, because I also strongly believe that, lawyers, like all of us, they're all humans too, right? So, I think a lot of lawyers sometimes feel they always have to be 100% correct, 100% perfect, because they're getting paid the fees and they need to know the answer to everything all the time, etc., etc., etc. Whereas on our show, we allow people just to come in and tell their stories, like what's worked well for them, what have been some of their setbacks, what have been some of their challenges, what have been some of the, things that the wisdom they would share. And it's really just a fun, informal way for people to learn more about the world of law. And as I say, we touch on lots of different topics. Obviously, we talked about, you asked me the question about like what's AI's future for the legal industry. We talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about mental health and well-being. We've talked a lot about workplace culture and flexible working. We touch on a lot of those discussions. We talk a lot about diversity and inclusion. We talk a lot about sort of future trends. We talk about how how somebody maybe came from one part of the world in the law and became successful at the other part of the world in the law. So it's a real, it's this law library, but with better snacks, with engaging, insightful content. And we've had anyone from like Carol Baskin from Tiger King, that a lot of people may be familiar because she's trying to change the tiger laws in the US. And we talked a lot about that, through to like presidents of the Law Society, various law societies, through to some of the law firm partners, some of the biggest US law firms in the world, and everything in between, from Amazon bestselling authors and beyond. And it's been a super exciting journey.
Interesting. Now, I've got this question because I have a list of questions here, but it's an interesting question that I wanna ask here. So, this is actually, it's not because I have a series of dumb fun questions, but I actually want to ask this question: have you actually been in a position where, in your current business, where you felt like, this is not a dumb fun question, it's kind of an interesting question, where things didn't go your way, it didn't go right, and you kind of felt like you were alone, like that low point? Have you ever had a low point in what you're doing, and what was it? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I think I've been in. I think when I first started entrepreneurship, I was naive. And I think, sometimes it's important. Obviously, I recruit and work with a lot of lawyers, but also having your own documents within your company, contracts and things in place, because when emotions go up, intelligence goes down, right? Typically. And so I've been in situations, maybe it's been with suppliers or various different parties, whatever it may be, and emotions have gone up and intelligence has gone down. And actually, it's what in the contract that really matters and legally has the matter of fact that can kind of resolve whatever a potential situation would be. So I've had some challenges in those aspects that obviously affect mood, that might affect like your strategy or thinking or whatever it may be from stakeholders. So, I've had to come over those, which puts you in a low moment, because I always want to, everything is energy, right? So I'm a big believer that I'm getting energy off you. Like I like your style, and obviously, we're getting a big good back and forth, and we're also having some like healthy but professional debate, but in a nice way. So I want to make sure that I'm around those sort of people. And sometimes you're around heaters, and sometimes you're around drains, right? And so I've been around a few too many drains, which unfortunately has then made me kind of get some of those low points. And now I just spend my time, particularly around my mission and my passion, is trying to build this community where people are more sort of in the heater environment and kind of nicer place, because life is just too short to be surrounded by people that take your energy.
What's interesting is, I think every entrepreneur gets into business because they believe that they can change the world, and then they encounter people out there that say they pretend to believe in the dream, but how hard was it to cut off those relationships, because those were people that probably meant a lot to you?
Yeah, it's difficult, right? I always say to people, if you're thinking of starting a business, don't start a business with someone who has the same goal as you. And they
Interesting.
say, what? That's crazy. I say, start a business that someone has the same goal as you, but matches your values. So what I mean by that
Mm,
is you and I could both want to start a multi-trillion-dollar sewing company, right?
okay.
You and I both have that goal, but your values could be, and I'm not, by the way, this is hypothetical. This is definitely not how you would be, but Rob, I'm going to undercut and I'm going to do whatever it takes with this business. If it means we have to just do this, and this to get there, but that's our goal, I'm doing it. Whereas I'm like, well, maybe we could be a bit kinder. Maybe we could be a bit more like we could maybe do that or this, and this. So don't have the same goal as someone. Have a shared value or an appreciation of values if they're slightly disconnected. Because I think why a lot of things fail is people have these goals, but the way they go about it through their actions and their values is very different. And as a
Mm,
result, things fray over time.
interesting. No, you said that, which is interesting. Not just no, I think that's it, because I think everyone has a personal story where they trusted in someone and then they get stabbed in the back because the person wants quick money, and it's almost like, yeah, that's one thing. My girlfriend is my, I call her my moral, she's the judge of whoever it is we do business with, because she goes and she looks at this person, she goes, I have a weird feeling about this person, or I have a something just seems
Mm.
off, because and I actually made a podcast about this, and I was like, women have something called intuition, which, and that power of intuition is something that we as guys don't, because you think about it, you're like, all right, let's go for the goals, and then you kind of get into it. And there's been a few people in which I'm like, yeah, no, because maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work, but you guys all align because now there's no much money involved. But when you start doing a deal for 100, 200 grand, 300, 400 grand, now the person's real personality starts to come out, because now it's
Yeah.
like, maybe they're like, oh well, how about I just legally, come in here, and then there's no legal contract, and next year they take the company from under you, and you're like, well, it was just, you said it, the naivete. But let's get into, because I know we're kind of short on time here, and I know you, like I said, father daughter time, when I
Yeah, I'm
stepping away
getting
from
the
that.
bubble bath nearly ready. You've got
Yeah,
milk in the
absolutely,
ducky. We're
absolutely.
getting ready for this.
I love it. So yeah. So this is a question: is, so do you like watching legal dramas on TV? Like anything, like
Well, it's funny you say that. So we have a icebreaker question on our Legally Speaking podcast, which is about Suits. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Suits with
Yeah.
Harvey Specter. And obviously it's brilliant show, but it's horribly not a good reference to the law, like the way corporate lawyers are doing like litigation lawyers. So any lawyer that watches that sort of, we always ask them to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of the reality of the law. How real is it? And some of the people who come on the show just say like it's a 1. It's not I wish I was drinking whiskey and in these high-rise buildings and closing deals within like 10 seconds. And then some people are like, do you know what? Actually, it's quite real. Like some of the suits that we wear are like that, but I wish I can get my head around a document in like that amount of time. So yeah, Suits, I watched it all, and I enjoyed it so much that I made it my icebreaker question for the show.
I love it. I love it. So have you ever tried wearing a judge's wig, and how did it feel?
That's a good question. I haven't, but we've had a lot of, interestingly, it's changed from, so barristers over here that you'd probably be
Oh,
familiar with. We
Barris.
obviously have
Okay.
solicitors and barristers. And barristers, with obviously, the late Queen passing, it used to be traditionally a QC. Now they're called KCs, so King's Counsel, with obviously our new king
Gotcha.
coming in. And what's interesting, my company KC Partners is now, linked very even more legally named in terms of KC, King's Counsel Partners, to the legal industry, which is quite bizarre. It wasn't originally the reason behind why we called it KC. It was after names of maternal grandparents. So no, I haven't worn a wig, but I'd love to. And I think I would look pretty awesome in it if I could say so
Hey,
myself.
I think you'd be I love it. So so this is the last question. So what's your favorite color for a legal document folder?
It's got to be red, right? And that's one of
Oh.
the because there's traditionally over here as well, you have the red pen, the markup red pen, right?
Okay.
So documents are typically marked up in red, and there's also the expression red tape.
Mm.
There's a lot of red tape you need to get through, so it's very linked to. And my old school was either red or black. So I'm wearing a black top today, but you'll notice with the League Speak podcast, our primary colors are red,
Red one.
black, and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, but I would go red.
Perfect. I love it. Well, it was good having you on. And Rob, where can people find you? And if you want to share that?
Yeah, people can find me on LinkedIn. It's the easiest place. Just search Robert Hanna on LinkedIn and I'm there. And then you can go to my profile and then you can join my community on my profile page. Just click the join my community URL on my LinkedIn page. Then you can get into our Discord and you get access to all our resources and lots more. And we can talk there.
Awesome, guys. The link will be in the description. Definitely go give Rob a shout out. And